Thank you. Tonight we'll be hearing Micki B from Bryan, Texas, and after she's finished, we'll open the meeting up for sharing. And if you have a question or comment on Zoom, you may raise your hand or type your question into the chat. We do record our speakers audio only. We do not record the sharing afterward or video of any kind. And with that, I will turn our meeting over to Micki. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Steve. My name's Micki. I'm a real alcoholic. And I'm from Bryan, Texas, where the men are men and the sheep run scared, and the women are cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I want to welcome y'all to my study in my house that I built 2 years ago. And my mother was gracious enough to gift me some land next to her. And she'll be 90 years old in 6 months. And I have been the best daughter I can be to that woman since I got sober. My sober date is February 5th of 1987. I just celebrated 35 years. And that's a few one day at a time. And I can't believe it. It just amazes me more. But, you know, my mom is so proud, and my children are proud, and my grandchildren have never seen me take a drink or a drug. And, you know, that's a lot. That's a lot. I am 66 years old. I have never been married since I got sober. My sponsor told me I didn't have to get married again if I didn't want to, and I haven't found it necessary. Now, I've had some serious relationships, but when they ended for what a variety of reasons, I just went and bought a new Harley. So I know where it is every night. It starts when I want it to, it stops when I want it to, and doesn't give me too much back talk. So I really enjoy my life today. I really wish we were in person because I miss in-person meetings and conferences so much. That's how I grew up in AA, and I just really miss that a lot. But I come from an alcoholic home, and my father was a very abusive alcoholic, as I know many of you have experienced such a thing. And my mother has never had a drink in her life. She has never smoked a cigarette. She only cusses when it's absolutely necessary. And she's been one of the hardest working women in my life. And it was really hard on her. My dad left when I was about 10, and my mom went to work doing jobs that men did. And back in the 60s, that wasn't cool. My mom was the first postal woman carrier in the 2 counties that I live in. I mean, they made it tough on her. And that really created a lot in my mind about, you know, who we were as women. But anyway, I didn't take my first drink till I was 12. And there was a lot wrong with me long before I ever took my first drink. I was born restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm probably the kid that they would medicate nowadays, you know? And I was just selfish and self-centered. My mom would go to work, rain, hail, sleet, and snow, carrying mail 10 miles a day. And I'd love to tell you she came home to a clean house and a cooked meal, but that wasn't what happened because it was all about me and what I wanted to do. I was the kid on the razor's edge. I had to have something happening all the time. And if it wasn't happening, I would make something happen. So, you know, my sister was 3 years older than me. She was the high school cheerleader. She was the class favorite. She was all of the straight A student. And I wasn't good at getting positive attention, but I was good at getting negative attention. And if you're a kid like me needing attention, negative attention was better than no attention. And so I had a lot of trouble in school, and you know, started getting into a lot of mysterious things. Some friends of mine, we were walking down the street in a town not far from here, Hearn, Texas. That's where my home group is. We were walking down the street, and a neighbor had his garage door open. And in his garage were cases of long neck Miller beer. It had just been sitting out in the heat of the summer, just begging for us to go steal some. So we went in there, we stole some of this man's hot long neck Miller beer. We ran down to her house and we opened it. Of course, it foamed all over. We sucked that foam off. We drank enough of that hot liquid until we reached that feeling of intoxication. Didn't take much. We probably weighed about 60 or 75 pounds. um, almost instantly followed by nausea and vomiting. We didn't have those skills that would come later on. You know how you appropriately coat your stomach before you go out drinking, or putting your finger down your throat to puke so you could go back and drink some more. Or we didn't know how to put one foot on the floor to keep the room from spinning. That was a real important one. And we somehow got in bed. We were sick, woke up the next morning, 12 years old, my first hangover. My head was splitting, my eyes were bloodshot, and we were washing our face. And my friend said, "My God, Micki, I'll never do that again." And she never did. The rest of our years in junior high and high school, I never saw that girl tie one on. She quickly saw what the problem was, made the correction, and didn't do it anymore. And being just as sick as she was, and I said the same thing to her. I said, "You're absolutely right. I'm never going to do that again either." And I never did. I never drank hot Miller beer again. But alcohol did something for me and to me that nothing had ever done. It somehow went down and quieted the madness that was just all over me. And it made me okay in my own skin for such a brief period of time. That brief period of intoxication was so elusive that for the next 20 years of my life, I would do whatever I could to experience that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. When I was about 14, I found better living through chemistry. I started smoking those funny cigarettes. I started taking all those black market pills where you take trips and never leave the room. Want to paint a house without a ladder, lay on the ground, listen to the grass grow. Took a lot of prescription pills. My name was never on the prescription bottle, but I took a lot of prescription pills. And it was not uncommon to find me out in a cow pasture after a heavy rain. When I tell you I'm a real alcoholic, my problem is not alcohol. And my problem is not those other things I do after I've been drinking. My problem is living life sober. I don't like sober. Sober for me was boring. Sober for me was depressing. And as the book so eloquently describes, I grow restless, irritable, and discontent. And for a lot of years, alcohol was a solution for me. I started drinking a lot at every opportunity. I love Katie Parker always talks about getting a creepy guy at 7-Eleven to go in and buy your booze. We did that. Robbed the parents' liquor cabinets, did whatever we could to get that sense of ease and comfort. And I always seem to overshoot the mark. I'm a blackout drinker from the very beginning. And I don't know anything about social drinking. I have no experience with that at all. The only thing I ever did socially was spread a little VD, and it was the 60s. That's what we all did. So, that's my experience with social stuff. But I got a reputation for being able to drink the football players under the table, and I thought I was just getting cool. Johnny H told me if I'd have gotten any cooler, I'd have froze to death. But I started developing this tolerance that would almost destroy me in the end. I didn't know that didn't happen to everyone. And I didn't know that everyone didn't experience what I was experiencing. And those blackouts coming to, not knowing where you are, not knowing who you're with, not knowing if your car's out there. And if it is, you got to go run around it and see if you've hit anything or killed anything. And it just continued to progress very quickly in my life. I hated those blackouts, but I could not do that. The shame, the humiliation, the progression of this disease, I ended up having to drink because of the things I did while drinking. That incomprehensible demoralization. A lot of things happen to young girls when they are putting themselves in those situations, and I'm not exempt from any of that. And the shame was just almost unbearable. I'm so grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that has not only given me the ability to live a free life as I do today, but has given me the ability to look back at my life and make some sense of it all. I thought when I first got sober that the last 20 years of my life was just a waste of time. But used correctly, it becomes our greatest asset because we can help save other people's lives. But the steps were the most profound thing in the changing of my life, you know? It gave me the ability to look back and make sense of it all. And when I did my first 4-step, I realized that all I ever wanted, and you know, if you grew up in an alcoholic home, all I ever wanted was to feel important and to feel special, to feel needed, to feel wanted. And I didn't know how to get that in a healthy way. And so at the age of 16, I traded all that for sex, just wanting to be loved. And it wasn't very long at all. I found myself pregnant, not knowing what to do. If you're 16 and pregnant in this day and age, it's not a big deal. But in 1972, in small town Texas, it was a big deal. My sister had moved on to Austin, and I went and stayed with her and brought this illegitimate child into the world. And a family came into our lives and said they would take my child and raise it as their own, with the condition I never saw that child again. And I made that deal. I made that deal because I knew I was in no shape or form to be able to provide as a mother for this child. And I came back to small town Texas with a scarlet letter on my forehead. Everyone knew what had happened. And I literally, at 16 years of age, had to have alcohol or some other chemical in my body that would allow me to walk out on the street and hold my head up and say, I don't care what you think. But I'm an alcoholic. And I have this built-in sixth sense. All anybody had to do was look at me and I knew what they were thinking. And what I know today is that I shamed myself to the pit of hell for what had happened. I don't know how I got through high school. It was a miracle. I graduated early at 17, and I made my first geographical cure. Texas was my problem. And if I can get out of Texas and go somewhere where no one knows me and I can start over and they don't know my sordid past, things are going to be different. And I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to find me a good man and I'm going to get married and I'm going to have children to replace that child, because I had this God-sized hole in my soul and I didn't know how to fill it with God. Not until I found you. But I tried to fill it with other things, material things, other people, trying to feel complete. And I had no tools to deal with that level of pain. There weren't counselors on every street corner. You know, I really didn't know how to deal with that. But so I am out of Texas and I moved 500 miles away with wonderful intentions. I'm going to, like I said, get married. I'm going to have children. I'm going to join the PTA. I'm going to be successful. And one day I'll come back and show them all, you know. And problem is I took me right along with me. And I moved 500 miles away to a small town outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, where they party 24/7. And that was not a good move for someone like me. I was there 2 weeks before I ended up in jail. Wasn't the first time I was in jail, but it was one of the times I was in a foreign country, it felt like, in jail. And I was too proud to call home. I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine says it doesn't take a genius to get out of jail. It just takes time. And it took its time in St. Charles Parish, Louisiana. And so I got out of jail and Plan B kicked in. And I ended up marrying the guy I got busted with, so he couldn't testify against me and I couldn't testify against him. Well, people have to have reasons to get married, right? So it made sense. So we took in sick together. And of course, you know what happens immediately. I got pregnant. Well, about a year later, I got pregnant and brought my first son into the world. And I had 2 children from that marriage. And, you know, I wanted nothing more at the moment of their birth. I wanted nothing more than to be a good mother. But I'm an alcoholic. And those two things just don't mix. I am pretty famous for saying, thank God I didn't get what I deserved. I moved back to Texas in 1980, and I like to say move because it sounds better than unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. And it was one of those spiritual moves in the middle of the night where you're throwing everything in the U-Haul and you're just heading for that state line. You cross that state line and wipe the sweat off your brow, and you're never going back there ever, ever, ever again. And you're okay because you don't know there's a step 9 in your future yet. So, but by the time I got back to Texas, I had made a lot of really, really poor decisions. And one of those was one night under the influence of alcohol, I let a friend put a needle in my arm. And by the time I got back to Texas, I knew what living one day at a time was. And I did what I had to do on a daily basis, not what I wanted to do, what I had to do. And I became a detriment to society. I became disgustingly and dangerously antisocial. And I'm not proud of the person I became, but that's who I was. And my marriage would fall apart, of course. I was in AA for a little while, and I heard somebody say it takes 2 healthy people to have a healthy relationship. And that was profound to me. You know, I'd always tried to make these frogs into princes, and it never seemed to work. But I had these 2 children, and there's not a day since they were born that if someone were to walk in this room and say, your life or your child, I don't think twice about that. Take my life and spare my child. But you see, I couldn't quit doing what I was doing for those children. The broken promises, the broken dreams. You know, I'm the alcoholic mother that goes to the store for a loaf of bread, and I don't come back for 3 or 4 days, sometimes longer. And I left my children with people children don't need to be left with. And my children heard things that no child should ever hear. My children experienced things that no child should ever experience. And they saw things that no child should ever see because their mother's an alcoholic. Now, I meant to go to the store. I mean, I'm going to get a loaf of bread, but you see, I'm supposed to take a right, and my car takes a left because I don't understand this obsession that I have. I don't understand that, you know, I'm driven by this, that I have no mental defense against that. And I take that left and I go do what I got to do. And when I do the first one, it takes me, it kicks off that allergy, and away I go. I can remember so many times coming home and I would be so sick and so tore down. And I've got these beautiful children with washcloths cleaning their mama up. And they would say things to me that I knew were the truth. They would say, Mama, if you don't drink, you won't get sick. And I knew that was the truth. And I would make those promises again to them. Yes, you're right. I'm going to stay home with you tonight. We're going to go to the park this weekend. The circus is coming to town and we're going to go. We're going to watch a movie and we're going to pop some popcorn because my soul screams, I love you. But you see, what happens is I start walking off that drunk and that hand starts shaking and that knot starts in my stomach. And then the obsession hits. And it's not that I go through the house like a crazed maniac, although many times I have. It's just this idea that comes to my head that, you know, if I take a drink, it'll calm my nerves and I can go play with those kids. But I take that one drink, and the next thing you know, I got to go to the store for a loaf of bread. Thank God I don't get what I deserve. I don't believe there's anything more powerful than a mother's love for her child except alcoholism. And it took me away from my children on a regular basis. You know, bad things happen to them that, you know, I do have regrets. I really do. But, you know, my daughter was molested by 15-year-old boys when she was between the ages of 6 and 8 years old because I wasn't there to take care of her. And how do you make amends for that? You know, saying I'm sorry just describes your character. But I will tell you, with the help of, I was 6 years sober when I found that out, and the help of the women in Al-Anon and the women in Alcoholics Anonymous and getting her the professional help she needed, that when she did get married, she walked down the aisle a free young woman. And I'll be forever grateful for that. And I know this may sound very strange, but I think our relationship is stronger because of these things that have happened to us. She's my girl. She's my girl. If you're paranoid and you think they're out to get you, they are. And in 1986, they came and got me, and I was charged with a first-degree felony, punishable by up to 99 years in the penitentiary. Now, I thought they were just getting a little bit serious with what I was doing here in Texas, but they weren't playing. I was hanging out with a bunch of buddies and my pals, my compadres. They call that organized crime. And I did some other things that got me to that first-degree felony, and I found myself in jail once again, facing some serious consequences. And I lost everything I had that was of any importance to me. And I stayed in jail for a long time. I eventually bonded out. And I'm one of those alcoholics that gets in trouble when you're in trouble. And I went back to jail and I was held at no bond. And that's a hard, hard place to be. Thank God my mother and my ex-husband stepped up and took care of my children. But I lost everything. And so I ended up, they offered me 20 years at my plea bargain, and I decided to take it to the box. And that's a jury trial. They said it was a jury of my peers, but there wasn't anybody there I'd have hung out with. And so I went through that trial. It was awful. I was found guilty because I was. And this jury came back with a sentence that's probably the worst thing you can do to somebody like me. You see, I'm not the kind of person that likes to be told what to do. But this jury took pity. I didn't see it at the time, but they came back with this sentence of 10 years intense supervision probation. And I was furious. They're going to be telling me what I can do and where I can go and where I can't go and who I can see and who I can't see and pee in a cup and report and do all this stuff. You know, I was so angry. I was so sick. I wouldn't have minded of going to prison and done a little turnaround, not 20 years, but done a little turnaround and come back out and ran my own life. I mean, that's just how sick I was. And they started me on this thing, probation. By this time, I got out of jail and I'm living in an abandoned house, no running water, no electricity. And I had one young man that was left in my life. His name was Bud. He was 24 years old. I like those younger guys. I always thought if you got them younger, you could train them, you know. So we go out to those sordid places. I love when Bill calls them sordid places. And you go and you see him and you do what you got to do to reel him in. And then you give them your experience, strength, and hope. But soon they get an idea of their own, so you got to get rid of them, right? And you can't get rid of them until you have another one. But I had this one guy, he'd been in my life for quite a while. His name was Bud, just cute. And he had watched me lose everything. And he's in this abandoned house with me. And he came to me one night and he made a grave error. He began to point out my failures. You've lost your kids, Micki. You've just been convicted of a first-degree felony. You're going to go to prison if you don't do something. And he asked me questions what life was about. And I had no answer for him. He asked me what I was going to do. And I had no answer for him. And finally, he looked at me and he dropped his shoulders and he said, you know, I can't live like this anymore. And I did what I always do. I made that grandstand play. You go ahead and leave, big boy, because I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. And our tongue is the strongest muscle in our body. And watch what comes out of your mouth, because you can make amends for what comes out of your mouth, but you can never unring the bell. And I cut that young man up. I sliced him as if I had a sword. And he just dropped his shoulders and he walked out of my house that night with me following him with a Coleman lantern, cussing him. I went back in and did what I needed to do to make it go away one more night. I'll worry about it tomorrow. It was always tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll worry about it. But for tonight, God, just give me some relief. And I was doing exactly what got me in all that trouble. The next morning, the sun came up as it always does, and I went outside and I found his solution to our problem. And that young man's body hung from a tree limb with a rope around his neck. And while I was in there making it go away for one more night, he was making it go away for eternity. When he said he couldn't live like that, he meant that. And the problem is I was in no shape or form to be able to see that. My life changed from that moment to this. I looked death in the face and I knew I was next. And, you know, when I was in jail, I had heard that jailhouse talk. And they talked about, you know, if you go to AA, it looks good when you go to court. I'm sure that doesn't happen in New Jersey, but it happens out here in Texas a lot. So I had checked out a couple of AA meetings, you know, prior. And I went into those meetings and, you know, it just seemed like it was a bunch of stuffy old men, probably 35, 40 years old. They all seemed they had cowboy shirts and cowboy hats and cowboy belt buckles. And, you know, I didn't seem to fit in there. And this one guy got up and talked about how his drinking had gotten so bad that his wife left him. And the pain of that was so great that he put the plug in the jug and he went to AA and his wife came back and his life is great. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, one wife, one time? I mean, come on. I know women that'll drink with you. Hang in there. But he was talking about true love, and I was so far removed from any of that. I didn't know what he was talking about. And then this girl jumps up in the back and she's worked at this minimum wage part-time job long enough to save up enough money to buy this used vehicle. And everybody just clapped and applauded. And I'm thinking to myself, chick, see me after the meeting. I'll get you a better deal than that. Might not have a title, but I'll get you a better deal than that. But she was talking about an honest day's pay for an honest day's wage. And I'm so far removed from any of that I don't understand and I don't hear the music of AA. So I didn't go. Now, when I went to my trial, I told them I was going, but they could clearly see I had not. But I found Bud that morning and I looked death in the face and I started running. And have you ever tried to outrun your head? I just could not grasp any of that, what was going on. Reality was just seemed like a dream. And I'm running and I'm running and I'm running. And finally the gift happened. And the gift for me was surrender. And the way surrender happened in my life was it came in the form of a tear. Because I'm a tough broad. I don't cry. And when one tear started down my face, it opened the floodgates for years of uncried tears. And I pulled off on the side of the road and I just broke down and bawled like a baby. And I don't know how long I was there, but after a while I sat up and I looked around and I had that deja vu feeling. And I saw people walking down the sidewalk carrying our beautiful book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was outside that stupid AA meeting I had been to many months before with no thought or effort of ever returning back there again. Had no plan on ever doing that. And I believe that that point of surrender, God intervened and had me where he needed me to be. And I knew I had to get in there or I was going to die. And I started up the sidewalk. It was cold. It was raining. I fell down on the sidewalk and literally crawled into what I consider my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd love to tell you that the Brian group rushed to my side with a plate of donuts and a cup of coffee saying, let us help you up, you poor precious child of God. But what they did was they looked down their long skinny noses at me and they said, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And I was tired. I went in, they said, just get a seat. I got a seat and I don't remember anything about that meeting or other than they said, keep coming back. And I had nowhere else to go. I don't know how many meetings I attended before I somehow miraculously remembered I was supposed to meet this stupid probation officer. And we didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have text reminders, you know. How I remembered that is another God deal. So I showed up at this probation officer's in her office, and I had been going to AA for maybe 10 days, and they had told me that this was a program of total abstinence. So I went totally abstinent and I went nuts. I went nuts. My hair was falling out. My skin was peeling. I weighed about 110 pounds and I'm 5'10". And she looked at me and said, "My God, Micki, can you do this by yourself?" And I'm like, "No, I can't." She tried every way to get me into some facility. The only thing available at that time for people like me was Austin State Hospital, and there was a 3-month waiting list, and I was dying today. When Alcoholics Anonymous says they can love you sober, by God, I'm living proof. I detoxed in those meetings, holding on to those aluminum chairs, shaking violently. There were times I would vomit on myself, and you cleaned me up. And you just told me that if I didn't put any more of that poison in my body, that this too shall pass, and I never had to go through that again. And you were so right. You were so right, and I dared to hang on, and I dared to hang on. And about 6 weeks later, I started feeling pretty good. And that's a danger spot for me. When I feel pretty good, I sit in the back of the room. In Texas, we call that death row. And I'm sitting in the back of the room, and I'm loud. I'd already heard that, how it works. I don't need to hear that again. I don't need to listen to all that stuff. So I'm in the back of the room telling everybody how big and bad and tough I am. Let me tell you about those big deals I made. And finally, a guy named Charlie, and every group's got a Charlie. Charlie got 15 years sober, got an answer for everything. Found out later, if an old timer really doesn't know the answer, they'll tell you it's in the book. I say that all the time now. It's in the book. But Charlie came to the back and he said, "Micki, why don't you come fix your coffee and sit up front with us?" And I thought, well, they finally want to know what it's like out there on the street, you know? So I fixed my coffee and went and sat up next to Charlie, who leaned over to me and said, "Sit here and shut up and listen." And he saved my life. I couldn't believe he was talking to the most important person at the meeting that way. So I sat there and I shut up and I listened. For the next 3 months, the only thing they let me say in an AA meeting was to read how it works, because there were no cuss words in how it works. I threw one in every now and then just to kind of liven that thing up. But then they made me the greeter at the door. And you had to really want to get sober when I was the greeter at the door. When I got here, I weighed about 110, 115 pounds. I'm 5'10". I'm sunk in places you're not supposed to be sunk in. I thought I was looking good. I came in with these skin-tight blue jeans or these black leather pants tucked in these knee-high boots with the brass tip on the end, because I was bad. I had all black t-shirts with the sleeves cut out and the neck cut out, because I was hot. I had a big wallet, black wallet in my back pocket, and a dog chain that hung down to my knee and hooked up here on my belt. And this belt had these studs that went all the way around. I had this big leather jacket with this fringe hanging down all over it. And I wore those gloves that, don't have the fingers in them. And I'd sit there and stare at you and do this. I had to wear my sunglasses in the AA meeting because that light was just a little bit too bright, I hadn't seen the sun in 7 years, so I had this pasty gray kind of complexion. And now they've made me the greeter at the door. So it was come in, sit down, shut up, and get a book. And then Charlie started talking to me about getting a sponsor. I hated women when I got sober. I learned later on the reason I hated women is because I thought they were all like me and couldn't be trusted. So I'd look around the room and I'd see a young man over by the coffee pot with about 30 days. And I said, "Charlie, I bet he could keep me sober tonight." Charlie said, "Men work with men and women work with women." Well, I hated women. So I became a chronic complainer in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm living in an abandoned house. I've just been convicted of a first-degree felony. I've got, nothing but the clothes on my back and, just complaining. And this woman came up to me after the meeting and she said, "Micki, I want to tell you, you're full of shit," and turned around to walk off. Again, I couldn't believe she was talking to the most important person at the meeting that way. And I went to tell her that when a voice like mine opened and said, "Will you be my sponsor?" Linda Kay turned around and looked at me from the top of my head to the tip of my toes and square in the eye. And she said, "I don't like you, but I'll help you because I have to stay sober. And in my head, I'm going, well, la-ti-da. She said, do you have a big book? I said, no. She said, do you have any money? I said, no. She said, well, steal one, you can make amends later. So I did. I've given away a lot of big books in the last 35 years. I would say horrible things. I would complain about my situation, and she would say ugly things to me like, well, get a job. And so I went to the noon meeting, and they said, are there any AA related announcements? I said, yes, I need a job. And by the time that meeting was over, I had my first sober job in AA. I went to work on an assembly line, drilling holes in marble sinks, 120-degree sweatshop. But I learned about punching a time clock. I learned about being on time. I learned about a day's pay for a day's wage. And when I got my first paycheck and I put my dollar in the basket, I got a standing ovation in AA. And they said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had become a part of. My probation officer, as a matter of fact, talked to her yesterday. She's been very influential in my life. She helped me get back into school. I eventually got a few initials behind my name that led me into the career that I've had for the last 33 years. And I'll be forever grateful that, and I know you've heard that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and I've had some amazing teachers. So I went to school, and I started working for a nonprofit organization. And I worked my way up to middle management. And then 22 years ago, we had major funding cuts in the state of Texas. And whenever you have major funding cuts, the first thing that goes is middle management. And I had not had to look for a job since I raised my hand in that AA meeting. And now here it is, 22 years ago, I'm without a job. I don't know what to do. A lot of things had happened during that time. I got real active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hate to back up because I always hate when people do that, and I hate to do that too. But when I got real active in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, when I started working my steps and I had amends to make, a lot of the amends I had to make was to my community because I had raped and ravaged my community. So I got real active. I got on the H&I committee. I got involved with service work. I was on the conference committees. If the Lions Club wanted to know about AA, I'm your gal, I'm going. If the Rotary Club wanted to know, take me, I'm going. I got so fired up on this. And at 3.5 years, the judge called me in his chambers and said, Micki, I hear about the good work you're doing in the community, and I believe you're a changed person. I'm doing these things because I don't want to drink and I don't want to die. And he says, I believe you're a changed person. And he released me from the bondage of the state of Texas. My probation officer encouraged me to take further action. And I've been taught to do the footwork, leave the results up to God. And in 1994, I received a full pardon from the governor of the state of Texas. Now, what does that have to do with recovery? I knew that God had a plan for that. I just knew that he did. And I certainly didn't need it to build my ego, I promise you. So I'm at this job. I'm, laid off now. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was unemployed for about 3 days. And a familiar voice calls and says, hey, I hear you're looking for a job. And I said, yes. And she said, well, why don't you come work with us? And that voice was my probation officer. I could not have gone to work where I just retired from had I not gotten that pardon. They don't hire convicted felons. And I've worked with people that were just like me. I worked in drug court. I worked in a lot of the treatment programs we implemented, some of the education programs we implemented. And I worked really, really hard to keep people out of jail and prison for alcohol and drug use. Had a lot of success, had a lot of failures, but I have to always look at those successes and hopefully planted some seeds along the way. But you know, life has been wonderful. I mean, it's been great, but you know, as Clancy always said, every day is not a holiday and every meal is not a banquet. I was 6 years sober. I was working in a psychiatric hospital, and I started getting really, really tired. To make a long story short, I went to the doctor. They ran some tests, and he came back and told me I had malignant cancer. To get my affairs in order, that I had about 8 months to a year to live. I was 6 years sober. I couldn't believe it. And I walked out of the doctor's office and I looked up and I said, God, why me? And I heard my sponsor's voice say, why not you? So I surrendered to my cancer like I surrendered to alcoholism. And I ended up at MD Anderson Hospital, best hospital for cancer in the world. And I met a young doctor there, young, cute Italian doctor, who said, you know, Micki, you're not going to like what we're going to have to do, but I think I can save your life. And by the time I was 6 years sober, I had a life that was worth saving. And so I said, let's do it. And I told him, I said, Doc, I know I have this cancer. I had a horrible cancer. I had colorectal cancer, stage 4. And I told the doctor, I said, I know why I've got this cancer. He said, no, Micki, you're too young. I was 38 years old. He said, you're too young. I said, no, Doc, I'm telling you, I know. He said, why? I said, from so many years of men blowing smoke up my ass. That's gotta be it, you know? And so I surrendered to that cancer. And I did, if someone came by and said, I believe this will help you, I'm in. So I went to Indian sweat lodges. I did hands-on healing. I did Reiki. I was in prayer grams, prayer circles. I went to churches where people talked in tongues and fell out on the floor. I slept on beds of magnets. I drank aloe vera juice. I burned sage. I have angels. I have crystals. I have feathers. You name it, I did it. If you came by and said, this will help you, I'm in. Because it wasn't important whether I believed it would work. But if you believe it would work, there's power in whatever you believe. Just like there was power in the lies I believed. I had horrible surgery. I had a lot of chemo, radiation, lost every hair on my body, had to fight the lesbians off. You know, but had a great time through it all. And I never had to go through any of that by myself, you know, never. And it's been an amazing spiritual experience to go through. All my life, I was a taker. I came to AA and I learned how to give. And then those 2 years I was sick with cancer, I learned a spiritual principle of receiving. And that's different than taking. You know, that's a spiritual principle. I had a friend came by, one of my motorcycle friends, and he said, Micki, are you angry with God? I said, why am I angry with God? I was so grateful I had done the work, that I had gotten with my sponsor and worked the steps, and that I knew where my place was and I knew where God's place was. And I had no longer had those two confused. He said, are you angry with God? I said, why would I be angry with God? He said, you've got this horrible cancer and you might die. If I believed for 1 minute that God had anything to do with my cancer, that if God is testing me somehow, then God is my problem. And God can't be my problem and my solution at the same time. What is my choice to be? My choice was, Father God, however this journey must end, please allow me to walk with the grace and dignity of a sober woman alcoholic to the end. This is the greatest honor I can achieve in this life, to stand with some grace and dignity of a sober woman alcoholic. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the last few years. You know, I lost my sister. She died of cancer, and that was really hard. My daughter married the love of her life, and they were married not quite 3 years when he took his own life. And to watch her be in that much pain and worry every day, was she going to take her life, was almost more than I could bear. And I'm trying to take care of my mother who just lost her daughter. I'm trying to take care of my daughter who just lost her husband. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, it's I. And I got disconnected. And I don't like that. I started feeling like I was having to handle everything alone. And thank God, whenever we get like that, we can stop. And I got back with my sponsor and I reworked the steps, and I feel a connection now that I haven't had for several months. And I'm feeling so good. I retired from that probation job in April of 20 when COVID hit really bad, because I live next door to my mom, and people I work with don't socially distance or take care of themselves. And I just didn't want to take it home to my mom, and it was just time. So I recently went back to work part-time, just because I wanted to, and to, just to do, because I don't think I'm through yet. And things have just been okay. My life today is complete. And I was listening to some music earlier that, I just hope that I leave some good memories, when my time ends. And I'm probably not what I should be. One thing I forgot. 20 years ago, I got an email from a young lady that lives in Sugar Land, Texas. And we communicated back and forth. And then my daughter, Monica, and I went to meet this girl named Kimberly in Sugar Land. And Kimberly's the daughter I gave up for adoption in 1972. So I have all my children in my life today. And that was on her time and God's time, and not my time. And I'm probably not what I should be, and I'm probably not what I could be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be. And thank y'all for having me. And I hate Zoom talking.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much.